Okay, so I'm going to be talking here a little bit to start off, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to have my wife sit here and do adorable little emotes for you guys to keep you entertained. Basically, this is going to be a short tutorial video, well, hopefully short, probably not, about how to optimize graphics in this game, particularly if you're having FPS trouble or you don't really like the way it looks. First off, we're going to start with the in-game options and then go to the out-game options. To begin, however, I would just like to point out that FF14 will be changing their graphics engine in 2.0. They're going to optimize it so that it's quite a bit better, rebuilding it from the ground up. Currently, they use an engine called Crystal Tools, which is actually designed for console games. That means that it was basically designed for a passive environment. In an MMORPG, you have an active environment, and so we get this sort of conflict with the graphics engine. So there are going to be things that you can't fix in this game. For instance, sometimes the camera will bounce a lot when you're on uneven ground, or the way the camera works in general can be quite a problem for most people. They may tweak it a little here or there before 2.0, but for the most part, you're just going to have to wait for 2.0 for a lot of these things to get fixed. There are, however, some issues that people come up with, and they post on forums frequently about common issues that they probably should have made easier to fix or not even be an issue in the first place, but they ended up becoming an issue anyway. So we're going to go through all the options and see all the different things you can do to try and optimize it the best you can. It is quite a taxing game, even before you take into account the fact that it was very poorly optimized. So we'll get started here, and we'll go into our configuration. It's the very first one at the top here, System. Now, these are just your normal little options you might want to deal with. Now, these are the only in-game graphics optimization things you can really do. They can, however, have a significant impact. This is character shadows. As you can see from my wife's character, it just takes off the shadowing effect that she makes on the ground from the sun or any other light source that might be there. This will take it away from NPCs as well. And so in a crowded area, this can actually help your FPS significantly and without taking away too much from your graphical experience. So if you're in a very crowded area, you notice huge drops in FPS that you can't stand, maybe try this first to see if getting rid of that helps. I'd like to talk about dust effects. This is basically just footstep effects. My wife will move her character around now on the ground, and we'll look at her feet, and we'll be able to see little poofs of dust around her feet as she walks. If I turn off the dust effects, that goes away. If you're really desperate for a few extra FPS, that may be able to help you a little bit. Unfortunately, like the shadows, that's only going to help in an environment where a lot of people are moving at the same time, because obviously until it actually tries to make the dust effect, you're not really going to have an issue with that. The next thing is the extended drawing. If I'm turning this on and off, you can see trees and stuff disappearing in the background. Now, this is a really good way if you're having FPS trouble, in my opinion, to get some FPS back. Basically, if you see the big difference it has when I'm turning it on and off, but if you just left it off and walked around, you probably would never notice the difference. You would not really care that you weren't seeing a few more trees in the background that other people may see. So on a lower end machine, again, this might be one of the first things I make go away, just to grab that extra little efficiency. This is physics. This is a little bit more subtle. While it's on, I don't know if you can see from our characters here, when we move, our hair bobs. Go ahead and move a little bit, dear. There you go. The hair kind of bobs around, and the skirts move a little bit. Like if I strike some poses here, I strike it again. Ooh, the skirt flops around. That kind of thing. Those little, it makes chocobo tail feathers bob and a lot of other things like that. That things that are supposed to move, they kind of move around a little bit. That's generally how that works. Now, if we turn that off, you'll see everything just got a lot more static. When I move around, No more hair bobbing. My hair stays perfectly still, like it's completely moosed down or cemented on. If I do the quick posing again, no skirt flap whatsoever. Fortunately, the skirt doesn't clip or anything like that, but it doesn't flap either. So, in my opinion, physics are really, really nice. I think they add, they might be subtle, but they add a little extra dimension to the game there. I'd really rather not turn them off. For the last option in game, we're looking at frame rate, and this is just a frame rate limit. It's a real basic option. It either limits it to 60 or limits it to 30. The only way you would want to take it off 60 is if your computer's not being able to render, that high anyway. This will really take the pain off of your computer if you set it to 30, so that it only tries to render 30 and never tries to render above that. It'll take a lot of edge off. I'm actually recording this in 30 anyway, so you're not going to see a difference. Some people can't see a difference between 30 and 60 anyway, but normally I would have a higher FPS than that, but I like to record in 30, so it's easy to resize. But anyway, that's pretty much it for the in-game options. I'm going to move on to the options that are done outside the game for now. Okay, so now that we've gone over some of the in-game customizations, I'd like to talk about the ones that we can do outside the game. These are actually more important. I did go over the in-game ones just in case they might be relevant, however. The first thing I want to go over is actually pretty quick. It's the NVIDIA settings. Just over here, right-click it and go to the control panel. You're looking for the Manage 3D Settings tab. You can either do this one of two ways. Either just change it in the global settings, or if you have other settings that you don't want messed with, you can come over here and change just the game settings. To get it in that list, you just want to find your FF14 game.exe. For me, it's in my I have a different partition separate just for this game. Obviously, most people aren't going to have that. So under normal circumstances, it's going to be under your C drive under Program Files. Now, after you click it and you have, whether or not you want to change the global settings of this, these are the two most important ones. Whether you change any of the rest of this stuff is really up to you. I found that for FF14 in particular, it does not like when I mess with the NVIDIA settings. Normally, I don't like to have all this application controlled stuff all over my NVIDIA settings. It really drives me crazy. And it tends to be more efficient to either turn something on or turn it off and not let autos happen and all that good stuff. But in this case, it just seems, for FPS sake and simplicity's sake, it just seems like it's better just to have the application and auto settings on for the most part. I do have this set to high quality, the texture filtering, but that's not really that important. Down here, however, with triple buffering and vertical sync, you want this on and vertical sync forced on. This is really important. This will clarify any screen tearing that you might have. Screen tearing is when you're turning your camera, you're running around, and you actually see that horizontal bar in the middle of your screen that looks like two separate images at the same time. That happens because the update, the speed at which the game is updating on your screen is different from that which your screen is refreshing. When they're unsynchronized like that, you'll get that screen tearing effect because you're actually seeing two different images at the same time. If you force these two things on like this, you force the refresh rate to be the same as how often the game updates, and it gets rid of that tearing. This has been a big issue I've seen for new people who come on and can't figure out how to get rid of that. Like I said before, there are many quirks that you have to deal with in this game. That is not one of them, and it has a pretty simple fix. Now, obviously, I don't have the ATI control panel up for you, but it's basically just as easy. Unfortunately, I can't show you how to do it, but you can do the same thing in ATI. You just need to go into the control panel for your ATI and find where they have triple buffering and vertical sync. They are going to be called the same exact thing, so you don't have to worry about that. Just got to figure out where they are and turn them on. Okay, so that's it for these settings. I don't really recommend anything else be changed, especially if you're having FPS problems, to turn anything up. I just don't recommend that. Now, as far as the actual game settings are concerned, I actually have a shortcut right here, but I'll actually go through the program so you can see where it is. If you go to Square Enix and go to Config, you've probably had to be in here at least once, because when you first turn it on, I doubt you could have standed its default settings. But I'll just go over each of these real quickly for you. The display mode, window to full screen. The advantage to full screen is that you'll get a better FPS. The game will run a little smoother. If you're on a lower end machine, you might be stuck with that. The problem is that unlike every other modern game or program that has a full screen mode, you cannot alt tab out of it. Just like old school FF11. Even when FF11 came out, that was weird that you couldn't alt tab out of it. But especially in this day, to have a full screen mode that you can't alt tab out of, that's kind of silliness. Even Yoshi has admitted that should have been in from the beginning. So we will be getting that in 2.0, just not right now. In the meantime, you can use windowed, but you will take a little bit of a FPS hit on that. For me personally, it's not really any slower. I know that a lot of other people on lower end machines have complained though, and they are stuck using full screen mode. Something to keep in mind. You may be forced to use full screen mode for a while. As far as window size, is real simple. This is just make this your desktop resolution. Don't worry about anything else. Just make it your desktop resolution. If you don't understand what these resolutions mean or anything like that, you can go here, screen resolution, and it'll tell you what your screen resolution's at. Just make the two match. That's the simplest thing I can tell you to do about that. That'll make your gaming experience a lot easier to deal with. Now, you may be saying, well, yours is higher than mine or whatever. But this is I'm using an HD monitor, and I have a nicer video card, so it can go this high. Some video cards, particularly older ones, will not be able to go this high, and older monitors will not be able to go this high. So if you have a different list of numbers than I do, don't be alarmed there. This is pretty much the staple resolution these days, 1920 by 1080. That's standard HD format anymore. So you're probably going to see a lot of that. But if you do have an older machine, you may not have it. Just something to be aware of. As far as multi-sampling goes, there is a lot of people talking about, when they put this way up, they have, obviously a lot of FPS loss. I think that most people will not notice anything past 4 times. I think that there are even more people who wouldn't even notice that. The textures in this, basically all it does is round out 3D images for you, so that they're less blocky. But in this game, they're not really that blocky to begin with, so it's less useful than it might be in other games. However, I do have mine at 8 just because I have absolutely no loss in FPS by putting it at 8. So I recommend just setting it at whatever point is comfortable FPS-wise. But if you are having trouble with FPS, lowering this is probably one of the first things I would do, as it does require a good bit of resources to use this, and there's probably not going to be that much gain in general from rounding out the images. Now, granted, I've always had the resolution quite high and other graphics setting high, so that may contribute to that. Down here in the general drawing quality, just leave this at 8, plain and simple. I mean, for whatever reason, if your machine is low enough, I guess you may have to start dropping the drawing quality. I wouldn't want to have to do that personally. But the truly important thing is to not raise it. I don't care how good your computer is. You take unnecessarily huge drops in FPS, even on the better computers, for absolutely no gain. I have no idea why they even have this setting, to be perfectly honest. Anything other than standard is just either ugly or ridiculously resource intensive. So leave that at standard unless you absolutely have to change it. Background drawing quality on high. I really haven't had this set as anything else. I imagine that you could probably lower this some to get a little extra FPS if you're having trouble, but it's just not something I'd like to get rid of personally. Shadow detail. Now this isn't like the shadow detail we talked about earlier in the game, the shadows button where it's on or off and you have your character shadows or you don't. This is actually talking about other shadowing effects, not actual shadows your characters project. I've had this on standard before to see what it would be like, thinking it might be the actual shadows your character makes, and it wasn't. I did not even like it on standard. I would want to keep this on highest if at all possible. Just to, it helps. It basically is the shadowing on the 3D effect of your character and some other objects. And It's really important for me anyway to get that more 3D looking effect in game. But I mean, if you got FPS problems, you got FPS problems. You got to take them from somewhere. So you may have to lower that. I don't really think many people should. That should just be at highest and leave that there. And for the graphics tab, now I actually have 2 links in this video. One for the ambient occlusion comparison and one for the depth of field comparison. Ambient occlusion is something they've started to add in games now that's supposed to make the lighting more realistic. Obviously at a loss in performance. In this game, it is notoriously poorly implemented. I do not recommend turning on ambient occlusion in this game. I mean, you can see it in the picture, the difference. I actually prefer without it, just because it's not that well implemented. Not only is it not that well implemented, but it takes a lot more resources than most ambient occlusion options would in other games. So I mean, it's up to you. You can look at the picture yourself and see for yourself whether or not, you know, that's something you want. But be aware that you will need a higher end machine just to have that available to you. Depth of field, on the other hand, I do like. It's kind of a gimmicky thing. Basically, all it does is blur the textures in the background so that they look like they're further away. I like the way that makes the game look. Yeah, it's pretty gimmicky. I think it's pretty 50-50 on whether people like it or don't like it. Again, you can see it right in the picture, what the difference is. Basically, it fully renders the textures and then blurs them. Unfortunately, it doesn't do something more clever than that, like render lower resolution textures for the background, or some other thing that would actually help with performance. So this actually will take away from your performance. Not as much as the ambient occlusion, but it will hurt your performance to have depth of field on. Lower end machines will probably want to keep this off because it's still rendering all the textures to their fullest, but then it's just blurring them after the fact. So it's just another step the game has to go through to render your screen. And if you're having FPS trouble, this is probably definitely one of the first things I would get rid of. I do like it, but I don't like it enough to lose any FPS over it. If I noticed even a decrease in 5 SPS, a couple FPS, I would definitely get rid of it. Down here, texture quality and texture filtering, I would hate to have to lower these. I really would. I like the nice HD textures. The textures in this game are very nice looking, and I would hate to have to lower their quality. Just in general, I mean, like I said, these will be one of the last things I would lower if I had to. But you're still having FPS troubles after you've lowered the multi-sampling, and maybe you've lowered this some, and you've even lowered the shadow detail and stuff like that. Well, you got to get it from somewhere, and it might as well be here. Now, as far as okay, I've done all this stuff. I understand all this. I've lowered as much as I can lower. I can't stand it. It either looks ugly or I'm still not getting good FPS. At that point, yeah, it may be a hardware issue where your machine just can't handle it that well, and you're either going to have to deal with the lower FPS or the poorer graphics quality or something like that. I don't recommend, however, that everybody go out and buy a new computer just because they're not capping out at 50-60 FPS. My computer will sometimes drop all the way to 30 FPS in certain areas of the game just because the engine itself is poorly optimized, and there's really just nothing you can do about that. There's a few of the things that you really can't do anything about, and I just don't want to see anybody dropping a bunch of money in hardware when it's not really the hardware's fault. You expect a game made by a company like this to be a little bit more efficient and well programmed, but not yet. You're going to have to wait for 2.0 for that, which is another reason you may not want to sink a bunch of money into brand new hardware. If they're optimizing a different graphics engine for 2.0, and you go out and buy all this expensive hardware just to make this one run a little better, and then you didn't really need it for 2.0, I mean, that may be a waste of money for you. Now, I'm a big nerd, and I have to have a really nice computer at all times. I generally have multiple computers, but that's just who I am. Some people, have to spend a bunch of money on cars, and some people have to spend a bunch of money on other games and miniatures and other things. Everybody has things they waste their money on. Well, I waste my money on computers. That doesn't mean I recommend that everybody else does. If you're not as interested in them as I am, then it could be a huge waste of money. Which leads me to one of my final points. you know, just because if you do want to upgrade your hardware still, don't assume which piece of hardware you need to upgrade or that you need the best of the best of the best in order to make it run. There are things that make the newer video cards more expensive that FF14 won't even be able to take advantage of. You know, like DirectX 11 technologies that these brand new video cards have in them. FF14 can't take advantage of any of them. In fact, FF14 2.0, when it comes out, won't even have DirectX 11 features in them yet. They say, you know, we'll think about adding that 6 months down the road after 2.0. So you're looking at, you know, almost 2 years wait before they might have DirectX 11 things in the game. And yeah, sure, the hardware will still be a little faster than its predecessors and stuff like that, but generally the thing, you know, generally what you're paying for when you're buying these brand new things is the ability to have those DirectX 11 features and things like that that just aren't going to be useful. In addition, just because you're having slowdowns or you can't turn up the graphics all the way to max, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always the graphics card, you know, or it's always the processor. Your bottleneck could be anywhere depending on what computer setup you have. Just something to keep in mind. If you're not that technically inclined, I definitely recommend telling people on the forums what your computer setup is like, you know, what your FPS you're getting is like, and that sort of information. As much information as you can give them, basically. And basically say, here's my budget, and I guarantee you there'll be a lot of people with a lot of good technical knowledge who can come on and give you some information on what you should upgrade to and what parts might be better for you, or if, you know, you can get a computer for that amount of money, and, you know, that sort of information. In fact, I've gotten a lot of technical information from the community over the years, and personally, I'm not sure where the biggest bottleneck in this game is. Usually with MMORPGs, it's the CPU. It's the processor. Overclocking can help a lot with that without spending an extra dime. In this case, it may actually be the graphics card. I really don't know, but that's exactly why I recommend you ask the community before you invest money in anything, and really think about whether it's even worth it to invest money into something when the graphics engine will be updated in 2.0 anyway. Just something to think about before you go spending money. Try everything you can first. See if you can get it within the range you like. If not, maybe ask around on the forums. And then, if you're really still that desperate, maybe you can spend some money. Okay, I hope to make some more tutorials, more in-game stuff rather than this looking at my desktop, listening to me yap stuff for 20 minutes. But you know, we'll see where it goes from there. I wanted to start with the more basic things first. All right, I hope this is helpful to somebody. Later.